Wargaming have reverted some of the changes that they were making to Crew 2.0, but we are not out of the woods yet, because there are still some factors about this new WoT Plus and of course Crew 2.0 and all of the changes that Wargaming are proposing with update 1.20.1 and of course the test server that we can all jump into, or could have at the point when they released it. But update 1.20.1, what have they actually done? Wargaming have come out, they've made some adjustments to how it'll work, and yeah, they've come out and said that some of the changes that they were going to make were pretty bad, and I guess, yeah, I mean, having seen some of the community uproar firsthand, yeah, I can see why they made some changes, and of course it was a terrible decision, some of the stuff that they were coming out with, and the genuine pay-to-win features, which there are still some in the game right now, and yeah, we're definitely not in the case where we're clear of all of the pay-to-win features that this update will add to the game. But the first thing that we do have, let's have a look at the changes to WoT Plus, because this is one of the biggest things in terms of actually just having to pay. And essentially, you've got to pay $9 a month to be able to get WoT Plus, and the advantages that you used to have, at least with the test server, would be that you would be able to demount bond equipment in terms of for free. So you're not having to actually spend anything to be able to get the bond equipment off of your vehicle, meaning you could swap it to any vehicle that you play within the game without any penalty. There would be no kind of limit to how many times you can do it. You could use it in one tank, then you could swap it to something else. And of course, Wargaming is saying that they didn't want to introduce this. They didn't want to impact the gameplay and make it a pay to win. It was not their intention to provide this, so I don't know what they were thinking by providing people with the fact that they could put bond equipment on any tank in the game. I don't know, but apparently they weren't thinking of that, and instead what they have now done is remove the ability for everyone to be able to use or demount bond equipment for free using WoT Plus. But don't worry though, because there is still bounty equipment which you can demount from all of your tanks and use it for free. Granted, you can do that anyway and it costs you, what, like 10 gold, or you can use a demounting token. I mean, you know, you've probably got a few of them, it's not breaking the bank, but at the same time, everyone is going to be using bounty equipment from now on, which I guess is a bonus considering the fact that you're going to have to grind silver to get so many different bounty equipments that you can just use them everywhere, in addition to the WoT Plus. So it makes bounty equipment more useful, I guess, in terms of how it's going to be played, and it definitely gives you an advantage over standard equipment as well. So it will be, yeah, excluded is what they're saying. So yeah, not particularly the best idea. I would have liked to have seen them actually remove the ability to demount bounty and of course the improved equipment as well, which is the bond equipment, but unfortunately that's just not the case. And yeah, I guess that you aren't getting so many pay to win advantages with WoT Plus, but there are still some changes that haven't been made to WoT Plus, and that is the fact that you will still be able to exclude another map on top of what you can do already from premium time, and of course the standard game if you don't have any of it and you're a free-to-play player, because you can exclude 2 maps currently if you have premium time and you're playing the game. If you are a free-to-play player, you've got 1 map that you can exclude, and apparently if you're using WoT Plus now, you'll be able to exclude 3 maps. Now, while this seems like it's not that much of a problem, or you might not think that it's going to impact that much, but if you think about it, anyone going for 3 marks is going to be at a significant advantage because they can ban 3 maps. And what do I mean by that? Well, essentially, if I don't want to play a terrible map for a light tank, I can exclude 3 of them. You can ban Ensk, you can ban Himmelsdorf, and you could ban Ruinberg, for example. And yeah, that means that you're going to be able to get away with basically being on only maps that are going to be okay, whereas the average player or someone who hasn't paid any money to the game will only be able to exclude 1 of them, which means that they're going to be not able to do as consistently as much spotting damage because they're not getting the maps that they need, and simultaneously the same for all of the tank classes, so you can just ban maps when you're deciding to play that aren't going to be that big of a deal when you do manage to get them in the tank that you're in, which is a little bit annoying. Of course, you do have the limit to how many times you can do it, but at the same time, if you're grinding through a specific tank to get 3 marks, you're probably going to play it for more than a day. So, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I guess we've just got to put up with it and shut up because it's coming to the game anyway, and you're going to have to pay $9 for it if you want to stay the ultimate competitive player in the game. And of course, if you haven't already seen, we did do a calculator for how much WoT Plus and all of the things that you can spend on World of Tanks is going to be, and I'll leave a link in the description to the calculator to see how much you'll be spending per year if you've got WoT Plus, if you're buying WoT Premium, if you're buying premium tanks, if you're buying loot crates and stuff like that, and if you're making purchases for free XP and stuff like that as well. Yeah, it's very expensive, and I've certainly spent a ton within the last year, especially for the content as we're trying to get all of the like tier 10 tanks so we can review them on the main account. But either way, what we also have with this update is the changes to crew perks. So obviously with Crew 2.0, they were going to introduce the fact that they'll be adding a ton more perks into the game. They'll be changing it from skills to perks. And essentially they were changing the attributes of each of the perks to give you different bonuses that would give you more of an advantage. For example, you'd be able to have way better accuracy with things like snapshot and all of the bonuses that you can have with that. And there were just an absolute butt ton of things that Wargaming were introducing, and what they've said now is that they're not going to be introducing any of these crew perks, or at least the new ones, and therefore you're not really going to have too much of a problem when you jump into the game anymore, which is brilliant. But I do think that one of the key things that was bad about the crew perk system was that it wasn't capped. If you had capped how many crew skills you could have, you could justify saying that, no, this wasn't for money, because of course it has the same amount of crews as we had before, and therefore, you know, you weren't able to get any of those high, like end crew skills at the end of it. You couldn't have them all. Wargaming's thing was that, oh, well, no one is ever going to be able to get all of the crew skills, but you could still purchase them if you spent an absolute fortune, mind you, on actually getting them, which would give you a beneficial advantage in game, so even more of a pay to win. If Wargaming's intention was that they weren't actually going to allow players to buy them or even get them, then why even put it in the game in the first place if the average player or even a very experienced player playing the game constantly throughout the entire year or 2 years or 3 years in the future, why bother even implementing it in the first place? But I would have liked to have seen them add new perks. I don't think that there is a terrible thing about adding new stuff to the game, things that are unique, novel, you can use them in different tanks, giving you more variety, but of course the bonuses and the actual percentages and the changes that they were making were just far too drastic, and it would be much better to implement smaller bonuses, add in a few new novel and unique perks that are able to actually give you something else that the game doesn't currently offer, and that way, you know, you can use different tanks in different setups rather than using the 5 or 6 different super competitive perks that we all use on every single tank that you play. And that way, you know, you're limited by how many perks you have, and that way you can pick the ones that are specific to the tank as opposed to just going out and picking the 6 or 7 best perks to get first on every single vehicle and crew that you own, which, yeah, isn't very fun when you're literally using the exact same thing. So having being forced to actually pick different things, I think that would be a good change. But of course, then you can run into the problems of people who have grounded out tons and tons of XP, and then they can no longer use the perks that they've spent the time to get, knowing that they were grinding their way to get those perks in the first place. So yeah, it's definitely a touchy subject, but I think this is a very good change, and it definitely wasn't ready to go into the game as it currently stands, especially with the bonuses that those perks did offer. But in addition to this, Wargaming aren't saying that they're doing nothing to the crew system. They are introducing some quality of life stuff, which is essentially that every single perk will be added in that will start actually training and taking effect effectively. So for example, Brothers in Arms, it will take effect straight away, even at 1%, and even if only one crew member is trained in it. So you can essentially, if you're just using one crew member with Brothers in Arms, it's going to work. And the same thing can be said if you were having 3 out of 6 or something like that. It just is like a proportion of the total amount, as if you had the whole Brothers in Arms perk on every single one of your crew. So that was, definitely good. Which is also something that, wasn't necessarily as easy to understand in the previous system when it came to what perks were usable and what will train to 100% and then become effective, whereas this makes them all effective straight away, which is good. I mean, you could work it out and you could find out because it does tell you, but it's kind of hidden away in the menus and the overviews of the perks themselves. So it wasn't necessarily the easiest for a new player or someone that was coming to the game for the first time. So always a good thing to have. Removing experience penalties for injured crew members as well, because that was a thing. Like the fact that this was even a thing, it's kind of just ridiculous to the point where, like, at the end of the game, if you had multiple crew members injured, you would end up getting less XP. I mean, hello, Wargaming, what even is this? Why is this still in the game 10 years or, 13 years or whatever it is now since the game has been released? Why was this still here? But yeah, ridiculous. Adding a battle interface for situational perks, that will still be coming in. And for example, Adrenaline Rush is one of those that is situational. So essentially it would just pop up and tell you that you are taking advantage of this perk. And I think this would be really good. And hopefully they'll bring in some of the other perks that were actually relatively good, but not overpowered from the crew system. And hopefully they do take at least some of the feedback and come away feeling like they've actually developed some things that are good. They just definitely did not implement them correctly into the game, and I'm super, super thankful that they didn't come out and make these changes from what they were proposing with the common test. And it's actually almost unheard of, or at least never really expected them to actually come back on the changes. Like, not probably 99.9% of the time when the community makes some feedback, they never ever listen, like genuinely. So the fact that they've actually come back and made some changes, I'll give credit to them. It's one of the first times they've probably ever done that. But yeah, thank you for at least listening to us to some degree. WoT Plus is still a thing though, so yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess they needed that money. But either way, they've also added, or at least providing clear descriptions of perks and their effects. So this is good. It tells you exactly what the perks are all about. Sometimes they're a little bit vague with how they work and stuff like that. And they'll also display the effects of all of the perks in the vehicle characteristics widget. So you'll be able to see in the garage all of the things that have been affected by the perks that you've put on your crew, and therefore you'll get more of an idea as to which things each perk is going to do to your tank, and which things you could maybe remove or what you don't want and stuff like that, and see which ones you'd prefer to have at a certain point. So yeah, I think it was very, very good, but I'm hoping that what they'll do eventually is actually just bring in the changes where you can use any crew with any tank in the game in the nation that the crew is, so that you aren't having to pay 1,000 gold or 1,200 gold if you want to swap a crew from 100% to another tank which is also of the same nation, of the same class, and you're having to still pay 1,000 gold or even go up a tier. You're not having to then retrain your crew from 90%. It's not that big of a deal, but it is annoying. And yeah, it's just super, super weird that they do that, especially when usually when you're swapping a crew to another tank, it's because you're playing a stock tank, which isn't in itself very fun anyway, so it's even less fun when you don't even have a fully trained crew. And obviously most people aren't spending the gold to be able to retrain the crew to 100%. So yeah, I mean, I would love to see them bring in the fact that you could either A, swap your crew for free, or even if it meant that we'd have to pay silver to be able to swap our crew to another tank of the same nation or even the same class in that nation for a X amount of silver. It would have to be realistic. No one's going to pay 1 million silver for a few games worth of grinding out the XP to get to 100%. But you know what I mean. Hopefully it's given you a good overview, but we should definitely still keep our eye out as to what Wargaming are going to be introducing, and we can't give them all of the credit because there are still some pretty dodgy stuff coming in with the WoT Plus as well. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and of course if you want to join me back in some actual gameplay and World of Tanks in its entirety, then stay tuned on the channel and hopefully you'll join me there, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.